Well, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to our second half of the evening. Now, our first part of this evening, we continue with our Hall of Fame induction. In the builder category, a person who started her volunteer career at the tender age of 24 in the northern city of Whitehorse, and has meant so much to our section and so many of our athletes for over 50 years, Diane Nielsen.
As most volunteers do, they first get involved to support their children's activities. And for Diane, it was no different. Diane and husband Bill drove to Whitehorse with two young children, Wendy and Cindy, and opened a business. They put Cindy and Wendy on the ice very early for activity, and Diane soon followed in volunteering to help with the club carnival.
Well, who doesn't love to watch young children in a club with so much joy and excitement on their faces in an ice show? And I think once Diane saw this, she was simply hooked. It was about 4 years later, after selling the business, when the family moved to the Okanagan and joined the Glengarry Skating Club. And once again, Diane and Bill offered to help the club. Well, Bill became president, and Diane learned how to play music rinkside on the old record player with the strobe light to make sure that they played it at the right speed. And many of you would remember, or at least of the older generation, Jay, of the wooden record cases and the old record players. It was an interesting time indeed.
Well, it was in 1972 that Diane played the music for the skaters at the BC Sectional Championships. And the old guy to my left here was actually skating in that competition.
Well, Tracy uses the term skating loosely, of course. I was more like flopping around the ice. But, anyways, it was funny how life's journey merges people's pathways together. And Diane was asked to run for the Okanagan Region Chairman in 1988 to 1999 season. Cindy and Wendy liked to skate, but were not involved in competition so much, and Wendy stopped skating at the age of 10, and Cindy danced until 17. However, Diane kept helping the sport, which, as you will see, helped shape our rebuilding phase into great success over the past 20 years.
As Diane became the Okanagan chairman, Skate Canada and David Dorr were looking for a place to host the annual meeting, and Penticton was chosen for the beautiful location on the lake. Diane became the chairman of the local organizing committee. This was the very first time the AGM would host an awards evening, and the whole event became a big success. Diane was and is a tireless worker, and with the vision of David Dorr and others, made that AGM of Skate Canada a defining moment in how they would run the meeting from that point on.
Well, Diane spent 2 years as chairman of the Okanagan region, and then was encouraged to join the section board of directors. When Diane came onto the board, Carol Speeton was the chairman, but soon after, Connie Patterson from Fort St. John, a huge personality in our section, became the new chairman. And it was at that point that Diane's involvement began to have a major impact. Connie asked Diane if she would take on the team leader position. When speaking to Diane for this evening, I asked her who else she was working with on that time, and she said, you dummy. She said that on the phone. And when you got this look from Diane Nielsen, you did not need to know. You did not need to ask what she was thinking, because you simply felt it. Ugh. So anyways, Diane and I began to design a plan.
Ted and I spoke the other day about how important the concept of team is in building pride and support for one another as these young people navigate through school, skating, and growing up. At that time, many of the skaters in BC trained elsewhere, like Edmonton, Toronto, and Montreal. It was then Diane and Ted composed a strategy to build pride in skating in BC, and a support system, both emotionally and financially, that would help build the competitive community.
So, at that time, we built 2 programs. One, a Whistler training camp that was fun and had team building activities, such as baseball games and soccer games outside, and we used BC coaches and brought in coaches from across Canada. It became one of the projects that everyone wanted to be at. It didn't matter if you're a BC coach or a BC skater, coaches across our country wanted the invitation to come to Whistler. There were two teams, a BC team and a development team, who were working hard to move on to the BC team. It shaped not only our competitive skating community, but also our current coaching community, as many of the skaters of the time are now coaches. Keegan Murphy right here is a good example. The effort was a great success, and the team and their pride showed it right here in this picture.
Well, the second program was to create a special team room at competitions. And I just want to go off script here, I hope you don't mind, but I had the pleasure of being up in Kelowna and working with Jason and Karen Mongrain. And Jason, they were telling me, first of all, how disappointed they had a planned trip away, and they really wanted to be here because they wanted to celebrate Diane. And started telling me stories. I says, you guys got to write some of these down. Well, they didn't get into the more colorful details.
I'll tell you later.
What they did say, the unsung heroes of BC and Yukon team trips are the team leaders. Year in and year out, Diane was a rock for the Team BC skaters. The team room at competitions was always a warm and welcoming place for skaters before and after their events, a place where they could feel the comforts of home. Diane has an amazing ability to know how to make kids feel comfortable. She would often be a shoulder to cry on or the one to make you laugh. She would make every skater that walked through the door feel cared for. But don't let her big heart fool you. She would put up with exactly zero shenanigans and would be quick to give a kick in the butt whenever it was necessary. Just ask any of the Okanagan boys who competed in the 90s. Love Jason and Karen.
And who were those Okanagan boys? So Jason Mongrain, Mr. Steve Muff, Ross Lancel, and Craig Bunton, boy, the leader.
What a handful.
Exactly. But she loved them, and she still does love them. And they were maybe a little bit scared of her, as everybody was, and she kept them on away. It was pretty special time indeed. Well, challenge during Christmas time. So there was a Christmas tree and other decorations in the team room. And it was special for the athletes to come and get food, relax, have fun, spend time in a gingerbread house building competition, coloring, painting, simply having fun. One special story. One of the national championships, I'll never forget this phone call. One of the national championships, Diane heard that Prime Minister Stephen Harper was in the hotel. Well, so in Diane's ever so delicate approach, she marched down to the security and requested, firmly, that he come to the visit our team room and be the judge of the gingerbread house building contest. Now, this is the Prime Minister of our country. So I thought to myself, God, she has, okay, I won't say it, but he did it and spent time in chatting. I don't know if you've got that picture of the Prime Minister in the team room here. There it is. Yeah. So he did it and spent time chatting and seeing what BC was made of. And not sure he got any votes out of it, but that didn't matter. But the thing was, as he left the room, I swear I heard the security detail say, hire that lady for interrogation. She'll get anything out of anybody. So, of course, with COVID, we were unable to do it this past season. I know the athletes and the coaches and parents commented on such a loss. We will, if we can, get back to that this upcoming season.
The work by Diane and many others was highly effective, and BC began to really contribute to Canadian skating success. The coaches, of course, also doing an excellent job. Along with managing the team came fundraising, and Diane asked Connie Patterson, chairman at the time, if there was any money to help to provide and nurture this team concept. Connie said no. The budget was tight, and that was it. So Diane said, if I raise the funds, can they be directed where we want? And Connie said yes.
Well, in typical Diane fashion, she went to work building a fundraising program for team activity, which was supporting the team building. Diane is often referred to as the Stuffy Queen. So Stuffy distributors around the province fell in love with Diane because she was buying most of them. Diane knew that the little skaters would want to buy them, and every parent would not be able to resist buying that for their child as they request. So funds were raised to support team activities such as team rooms, team dinners, seminar activities. And one other story on this, Diane convinced David Dorr to allow her to sell Beanie Babies. Now, I don't even know what Beanie Babies were, but let's show a picture of those things. There they are, Beanie Babies, at the 2001 World Championships at the Skate Fest, which was close to BC Stadium, and Vancouver. And she raised $30,000 for the BC team selling Beanie Babies. Clearly, Diane had a talent and a passion.
Yeah. Wow. At the same time, Diane took over the Athletes Trust fundraising program when Audrey Johansson left the section and has helped raise over $800,000 in the past 20 years. Yeah. The interest of that account goes to support skaters' competition expenses and post-secondary education support. Usually that is through an auction at this awards evening, but because of COVID, we have developed a number of new approaches to fundraising.
Well, one of which was a 50-50 draw, which we hope that you've signed in for. We've had people over the last few days signing up, so that's good, and we'll announce the winner a little bit later. I'm sure that Diane will be going through the room checking on you, so you better get to it. And we'll announce the winner just a little bit later.
Wherever Diane went, she brought fundraising with her. Exhibit number 1. Here's a picture of Diane arriving at the 2006 Winter Olympic Games as part of the figure skating volunteer team, many of whom came from the BC section. Here's a look at Diane arriving at Athletes Village in Torino, where they stayed, and being searched by the Italian police, and
now,
guess what they found?
You see, one can see why the police would be suspicious. A suitcase full of stuffies for Olympics. They felt them, they prodded them, they sniffed them. They were looking for all sorts of things. And to Diane's relief, of course, none was found, and they sent her through into the village.
Diane worked the 2006 Winter Olympics in Torino with many other BC volunteers. Janice and Malcolm Hunter, Marnie and George Hatton, Murray Anderson, Judy and John Burwash, Rick Pellin, husband of Susan Heffernan, Bev Viget, assistant manager for figure skating. It was a special time, and just like our skaters, it was a real team effort of volunteers.
Of course, 4 years later, Diane and most of this team and more were involved in the 2010 Winter Olympics right here in Vancouver. And when I asked Diane which one she preferred, she clearly and quickly said Torino. Why? It was magical time, wonderful people. I was able to bring stuffies. Always, always on the fundraising angle.
Diane had a major impact on skating in British Columbia and the Yukon, which has formed an impressive foundation of volunteers, skaters, coaches, parents, and staff. These are just a few of the areas in which Diane has made a significant contribution.
Well, in closing, there is simply not enough time to share all that was done by Diane and others during this era. Diane and I worked together, we laughed together, we fought together, we celebrated together, but we always had one thing in common: the skaters, their mission and journey in our sport and in their lives. Diane is not a public speaker. Diane does not like the spotlight. Diane will always be direct, sometimes blunt to you. And Diane melts at the sight of children and their smiles. Diane is completely loyal to athletes. And if you have a buck to spare, she'll encourage you to share that with these young skaters' cause. It is a great honor and gives me great pleasure to welcome into the Skate Canada BC Hall of Fame, Diane Nielsen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Diane. Of course, these athletes that came up lived, Keegan Murphy, Kevin Reynolds, Kendra Greenslade, Vanessa Sturdy, were all skaters, young skaters during Diane's time, now work on the Skaters Support Committee, and we felt there are really hundreds of skaters that Diane has come in contact with and meant so much to her career, and we wanted her to be surrounded with that representation, so thank you very much to all those former athletes. Okay.